So everyone, my name is Dr. Kerry Magro, professional speaker, best-selling author, and autism self-advocate. I'm really excited to have you all here today for our presentation panel on defining autism, a journey of self-advocacy and acceptance. In the area, feel free to tell us where you're tuning in from today, what your relationship is to the autism community, whether you're a parent, self-advocate, or an educator. And when was your first time you were introduced to the topic of autism? I was first introduced to the topic of autism when I was 3 years old, when I saw my parents watching the movie Rain Man for the first time. So I've definitely learned a lot more about autism since that opportunity. So one of the things that we'll talk a little bit about today is the whole realm of neurodiversity and what that looks like. We want to provide you with proactive ways that you can not only encourage self-advocacy, but debunk misconceptions that we currently have out there in the autism community. April is also Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, where we highlight the over 70 million people worldwide who have an autism diagnosis. But at its core, when we talk about the topic of neurodiversity, it's focused on having a brain that looks at the world a little bit differently than someone who would be considered quote unquote neurotypical, or somebody who doesn't have a neurodiverse condition. So diagnoses that often fall under the neurodiversity umbrella are included but are not limited to autism, ADHD, Down syndrome, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and dyslexia. It's important to note that about 1 in every 5 individuals in the world currently have some form of disability, making up the largest minority. But it's often one of the most underserved minorities because of the fact that some individuals have high support needs and aren't able to speak up and advocate for themselves, especially when it comes to different things that they may need in our community today. We also need to have larger conversations about the prevalence of disability in adulthood. Autistic children grow up to be autistic adults, and we need to be ready for them and realize that autism does not end at the age of 18. Where I'm based in the United States, I'm based in Hoboken, New Jersey. We have just a little bit of about 1 in 36 individuals who have some form of autism diagnosis. So we definitely need to do a better job, because when I was diagnosed, it was about 1 in every 1,000 being diagnosed. When I was officially diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, when I was 4 years old in 1992. So having larger conversations about this topic is really important. World Autism Month was started by the Autism Society of America in 1970. And in 2007, the United Nations proclaimed April 2nd as World Autism Awareness Day, a national day to celebrate and recognize those who are on the autism spectrum. So now I'm going to give you just a little snapshot into my journey before I move it to our panelists, who will introduce themselves before we ask them several panel questions before we go into answering your questions that you might have for our self-advocate panelists today. We'll have about the last 15 minutes of today's presentation will be for any questions that you have. So feel free, as we're moving along, to write them in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can at the end. So my journey, I grew up with 2 extreme laser-focused key interests. I grew up wanting to become the 6th member of the Backstreet Boys and the next Larry Bird. And I took those passions to get a degree in sport management at Seton Hall University before deciding to change career paths to become one of the first openly autistic, professionally certified public speakers in the country. Later on, get my doctorate in education so I could hopefully teach at the college level about our very special community one day. I've had the opportunity to work with so many great K through 12 schools, in addition to companies, on the ROI benefits of hiring neurodiverse workers, and realizing that those with disabilities are twice as likely to stay at a job longer. They're more likely to take less time off from work. And when we talk about the bottom line, the majority of reasonable accommodations for autistic people cost absolutely nothing. So understanding that there are some ROI benefits that are included in there. I started a 501c3 nonprofit organization that provides scholarships for autistic students to go to college, small business grants as well. We've given out 150 scholarships for autistic students to go to college in the past 9 years. And I'm thrilled to say we've had several winners from the Canada area. So it's really excited to be able to collaborate with Geneva again this year. I've written 5 books. My latest book, Supporting Your Autism Journey, actually, ironically enough, just came out yesterday for World Autism Awareness Day, and we reached an Amazon bestseller list for special need parenting, where we highlight and celebrate some of the most frequently asked questions that we receive in the autism community from parents, educators, first responders, and employers. Without further ado, I would love to introduce our first panelist, Eileen. And Eileen, take it away.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here, Kerry. It's always a pleasure being in a panel with you. For those who don't know me, I'm Eileen Lamb. I'm a mother on the spectrum, and I have 2 children who are also on the spectrum, one with level 1 autism, just like me, and another one who has level 3 profound severe autism. I'm a podcast host, and I'm also the director of social media at Autism Speaks. I'm a published author, and I guess a blogger. I have my own social media platform, the Autism Cafe, and I share resources and, a little bit of my life being a mother on the spectrum, raising 2 kids on opposite end of the spectrum. So thank you for having me here, Kerry.
And before I transition to the next slide, Eileen, you also have a documentary that has been going around in the film festivals. Can you just mention that really quickly?
That's true. I forgot about that. There is a documentary made by an independent filmmaker that's titled Who Speaks for Charlie? And it actually won the Best Short Documentary Award at the Atlanta International Film Festival just last month. So I'm so excited to see this documentary going around because I think it's a very important subject. Like Kerry and myself, we're able to self-advocate, and that's fantastic. But there are autistic people who never gain those self-advocacy skills, right? And what happens to them when their parents are gone? I mean, it's a really profound and deep and sad question, but we need to ask that question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Eileen. And now we're going to transition to Gyasi.
Hi, my name is Gyasi Burks-Abbott, and I'm on the faculty of a fellowship program in neurodevelopmental disabilities called LEND. LEND stands for Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental and Related Disabilities at Boston Children's Hospital and the Institute for Community Inclusion at UMass Boston. I also serve on the different committees, commissions, and boards of different autism disability organizations. I've also written for different autism publications and disability publications, like the Autism and Adulthood Journal, the Developmental Disability Network Journal, and I've also written a book. And I'm a public speaker, and I guess I'm glad to be here. And I'm thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Anytime. So the first question I would like to ask our esteemed panelists is, can you tell us about a time when you first started self-advocating for yourself after you found out that you were on the autism spectrum? Eileen, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So to me, that question, I think of it in 2 different ways. So first of all, there was a time when, after I was diagnosed with autism, I was 25, so I was pretty old. I wasn't a child. And it was really a mind-blowing experience to be diagnosed with autism. It gave me so many answers as to why I've always felt different and could never really understand why. Like why I couldn't go to the grocery store without having a meltdown, why I couldn't go to concerts, and everyone around me seemed to be enjoying these things. And after my diagnosis, I started telling people, like, I can't go to that place to hang out. It's just too loud, I'm sorry, I would love to go to a concert, but I'm not in that point in my autism journey where I can work through it yet. And I started being able to self-advocate in that way, to tell people, hey, that's too much for me and my autism at this point. In the future, I might be able to do it. I hope so, but right now I can't, and that's okay. And knowing that there's nothing wrong with me, it's just the way my brain processes sensory input differently has been really helpful for me to not be so hard on myself for not being able to do these things other people seem to enjoy, which is still something I'm having a hard time understanding. But anyway, but another thing is that after my own autism diagnosis on social media, it's been really helpful for me to be able to, because there are a lot of autistic people on social media who speak on behalf of the entire autism and autistic community. They will say things like, autistic people hate the puzzle piece symbol, or autistic people hate the color blue. And I don't think that's fair for anyone on the spectrum, myself included, to make blanket statements that include the entire autistic community, as in we're one person with one voice, when we all have such different opinions on things, because we're human beings, right? And so after my diagnosis, I started self-advocating and saying, hey, you know what? Some autistic people might not like the puzzle piece, but I do. Some autistic people might not like the color blue. I do, and there are many more. So I think in that way, it was really helpful for me to be able to, what's the expression, put my foot in the door or something, to just, tell people that we're all different people, right? It's that quote from Dr. Stephen Shore. If you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love what you just said there, Eileen, is from the concept that I get a lot of questions from parents. And one of the questions that, and one of the comments that parents tell me is, my child has the type of autism that nobody talks about. There's a great mom advocate. Her name is Kate Swenson, and she talks about the secret world of autism. And it feels like a lot of the times those autistic advocates, and not saying it's everyone, because like you mentioned, it's a spectrum. There's some individuals who like to speak up about these topics and use it from all autistic people feel this way and all autistic people feel that way. But that's not true. There's a wide range of people who feel exactly how you feel, like Eileen. So it's really important to highlight all those stories. Gyasi?
Yes, I guess I started advocating for myself. I was diagnosed with autism. Well, I was definitively diagnosed in 1991, right before my 18th birthday. Problems with my development had pretty much been noticed since infancy, but I went through several, I went through what was called mental retardation. I was in special ed for a while, but finally I was diagnosed definitively with autism. And around this time, I actually, when I went to college, I majored in psychology. And I made, actually my mom's suggestion, I made autism part of my psych major. So I started studying autism, which meant that, for instance, I would tell my professors about my autism. And I got involved with a local autism organization. I started giving presentations. I would even be interviewed by people who wanted to know more about autism. And I actually worked at a day program for developmentally disabled adults. And one of the interesting things I discovered is how much I identified, even though I was considered higher functioning, and these people would actually today be called profound autism. I identified with them so much. I saw myself in them. In fact, in a way, they were externalizing things that I kept to myself. So it was very interesting. But also I saw a human spectrum. And many things that they did, they were just like, we all kind of do that. It's just autism, almost what the writer Donna Williams said, autistic writer. She said, autism is normal with the volume turned way up. But I mean, so I got involved with autism organizations, and I find that many of the things I do now as working, it's still in the field as a faculty member in a neurodevelopmental disability, we do a lot with public policy and talking to legislators and policymakers. And what I find myself doing a lot is talking. I mean, I'm a self-advocate, but I'm not really advocating for myself as much as I'm tapping into my own experience to see, what would have helped me or what did help me, for instance, to sort of advocate for the type of policies that should exist for other people on the autism spectrum. Understanding, of course, that there are limits to my experience, but basically I could always use that as sort of a guide. For it's like, I know that would have helped me, or I know that did help me, so maybe it will help other people too.
Yeah, I love that. And the idea that you just mentioned, I mean, some people self-advocate for themselves because they need things like reasonable accommodations, but some individuals like you and me, I feel like we started self-advocating, but now we're self-advocating for a larger community of people who really need our support. So I think that's a really great mention that you also included. So yeah, the first time I started self-advocating for myself was in college. I found out that I was not getting an IEP in college, which really confused me. And then I realized, wow, I need to self-advocate for myself. So I told my college professors for the first time that I had autism after years of not having to tell anybody, and really not only my autism, but my disability in general. And then things kind of just became so much more full circle. And that's kind of a big reason why I decided to go into a career in public speaking as well, to self-advocate for others who didn't have the blessings and opportunities that I was able to receive during my journey. So the next question is, what is one and there's so many, what is one misconception around autism that you'd like to see debunked? Eileen?
Yeah, it would be hard to choose just one. Yeah, the first one will be that autistic people lack empathy, because I mean, I'm sure it's true for certain autistic people, but again, like, it's such a wide spectrum. So to make like such a blanket statement, I think is not fair. I think this comes from the fact that autistic people show their emotions in different ways, right? So what may be perceived as a lack of empathy is not necessarily that we're not feeling these things. It's just that the way we communicate it doesn't come across in a typical way, how you would, think of someone showing empathy. Other misconceptions that really get to me, mostly about, the fact that autistic people are like one voice, like we were just talking about, because we all have different opinions. And I really think it's harmful to the autistic community when people try to speak on behalf of other autistic people. And that's why when I'm speaking, I like to remind people that I'm speaking from, that's my opinion as one autistic person. It's not me speaking on behalf of the community. That's just my personal opinion. And, Kerry, you might have another opinion, and that's totally fine. And then there are misconceptions about Autism Speaks and ABA therapy, which also are really getting to me, because I've benefited from both of these resources, both ABA therapy and Autism Speaks. And, I think that's one of my, as a self-advocate, one of my mission is really to give people the facts so they can make their own judgment, but not based on, what people are saying on social media, based on actual facts. And I think that's really important, and people should take that into consideration when they're reading social media.
Yeah, I agree 100%. For those who are joining us today, Eileen is one of the largest champions, especially on Instagram. Eileen, you have like 200,000 Instagram followers. I don't like to brag for you, but you have like 200,000?
Something like that, yeah.
And one of my favorite quotes from Eileen on her Instagram page was, this must have been over a year ago, and she posted, I'm the expert in my autism diagnosis. I'm only the expert. Wasn't that the quote, Eileen?
I'm only an expert on my own autism, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I found that so powerful, because I mean, it really is so true, because we have so many perspectives in the community. So I absolutely love that you mentioned that. From the empathy perspective as well, for anyone who's joining us at home, one of the ways that I found empathy and a great example of that is the show Love on the Spectrum. I got the opportunity to consult on that show, and we were just renewed for a third season for Love on the Spectrum U.S. And that kind of really showed me a lot of examples. I get that so many from my mentees, but like seeing so many incredible people on that show on Netflix show empathy, who are young autistic individuals, was really just breaks down misconceptions like that. Gyasi?
Yes, Eileen, I'm so glad you brought up empathy, because that particularly bothers me. And what actually bothers me is not that there aren't autistics that might have trouble with empathy, but it's the way it's framed as being a uniquely autistic problem. Like, I think about, for instance, how we describe other conditions. Like, for instance, you'll hear, depression is something that anyone can experience, but there's a clinical depression. But empathy or theory of mind is never presented that way. Theory of mind is always presented as being uniquely problematic for autistics. And I would love to see it where people say, all of us, autistic or not, might have a problem seeing something from someone else's perspective. Maybe for some people, it's more extreme than others. Or there might even be situations where anyone can have trouble seeing something from someone else's perspective. Maybe because they're stressed out, or they're angry, or they have a certain bias. So I'm so glad you brought up empathy. But in terms of a misconception I would like debunked, it's that it's not really one misconception as much as it's sort of always approaching autism in such a regimented way. So either, oh, you don't have intellectual disability, therefore you must be good in computers and math. Or, oh, you have a certain skill in an area, therefore you must be a savant. I mean, interesting, because savant is a term we only use for people either are autistic or intellectually disabled. And it's like, I think about, for instance, someone who was complimenting me on my book. And the way they complimented me was by saying, you're like Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin has an affinity for animals, and you have an affinity for words. Now, I appreciated the compliment. I mean, there's nothing better than being compared to Temple Grandin. But later I was thinking, why can't I just be a good writer? I mean, why do I have to be, as most people, you compliment on their work. You're not a savant. It's like, you might say they're brilliant, they're a genius, they're inspired, but savant's so I guess a myth I would like to see debunked is not so much a myth as it is not looking at autistic people as three-dimensional people, not one-sided, one-dimensional.
Yes. Yeah, I agree 100%. On terms of this misconception, I think the two biggest misconceptions that I see, especially in the autism community, are still around those stereotypical good doctor, Rain Man depictions that every single person who's autistic is a savant, has a photogenic memory, and can win you $88,000 on the blackjack tables counting cards. We need to normalize this because, especially in our community today, girls are diagnosed far less than boys in our community, and especially in the Hispanic and Black communities are diagnosed later than white children. So we really need to debunk those misconceptions to help bring not only earlier diagnoses, because early intervention is the key, but a better understanding overall. The next question I have for our esteemed panelists is, and thank you all so much, by the way, for the comments. We're getting so many great comments from educators, parents, therapists. We're really, really excited to have you all for today's panel. Sometimes people might not understand what it's like to be autistic. Can you share how you've helped others understand you better, especially at school or work? Eileen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying with your first question, Kerry, but I've been better about advocating for myself and explaining to people that, things might not seem like a big deal to them, like going to a concert and having all the noise, going to the grocery store and, having to navigate like the noise and interacting with people and navigating the store. Like, to neurotypical people, that's normal and easy, but for someone like me, it takes like so much planning to do this simple task. And I think being able to put a word on my problems is helping people understand me better. At least I hope. And sometimes, because I look so normal, for lack of a better word, it's difficult for people to comprehend why I couldn't do these things, right? After all, like, you just walk into the store, you grab your gallon of milk and you're out. But the reality is really not that simple. And another way at work, and, I'm lucky enough to work for an autism organization, so they know autism. But, I tend to be pretty honest in the way I deliver things. And people are it's nice to be around people who are not going to see my honesty as being rude, but it's just my delivery. I'm gonna say things as they are. I try to be polite, but I don't turn around like the answer. I just go straight to it. And I think in another organization that's not comfortable with autism and educated, that might be a problem. But because at Autism Speaks, people know about autism, I think it's easier for me to be myself. So I feel like very lucky that I can be myself at Autism Speaks where I work. And we have that program at Autism Speaks called WIN, Workplace Inclusion Now, where we're trying to teach and educate other places so they can be accommodating to autistic people, actually. And I hope more and more people and organizations do it, because like you said in your introduction, Kerry, autistic people can be very, very good employees, and we need a better inclusion, because right now I think the rate is 1 in 5 autistic person is employed. So that's way too low, and we can do better.
So well said, Eileen. Gyasi?
Yes, actually, I would say a lot of the work I do now is explaining not only what it's like to be autistic, but what it's like to be disabled, because a lot of my work has to do with talking to policymakers, and also sometimes medical schools will ask me for my input, for instance, on research studies, or like I'm part of this program called Operation House Call in Massachusetts, which goes around to medical schools and nursing schools to teach people, future healthcare professionals, about disability and neurodiversity. And so basically in that case, I talk about my experience with the healthcare profession, for instance, to give them what worked for me, what didn't, or I give my perspective for different research studies. Or for instance, sometimes people will just ask me, what is it like, for instance, like people have contacted me online from my childhood and asked me questions. But also, one person who read my book, whose kid is profoundly autistic, said that she actually understands her kid better after having read my book. And I heard the same thing from someone who heard me present, who said that when she hears me speak, she likes hearing me speak because she imagines what her son would sound like if he could speak. So that's what I do. Yeah.
I will say one thing about his book. My mom actually, so me and Gyasi were in the Bahamas at a fundraiser for a autism nonprofit, and my mom got the opportunity to be my +1. She read the book. She's a speed reader. Read the book within 3 days, and like literally called me like sobbing. If that's not a indication that you should check out his book, I don't know what is. It was very heartfelt for sure, though. So in terms of this question, just to also add on to that, I think it's important that we also understand by using our voices can lead to just more people feeling seen. I had an interesting story just a few weeks ago. I was speaking at a middle school in Boston, and a autistic 13-year-old came up to me afterwards, and he's like, "Thank you so much for sharing your story. You make me feel seen and represented." And I've received comments from students before, but that kind of just led to a full circle moment in my life, because I feel like a lot of the times by just sharing and helping others understand us a little bit better can have a trickle and domino effect that could potentially impact somebody and make them feel seen and feel included, whether it's in school or in work. So the next question I have for our panelists is, what kind of changes do you hope to see in the future for people with autism? And how can we all help make that happen? Eileen?
Whew. So many, again, $1 million question. Well, I'm thinking here about my son who has level 3 profound autism. And, it's natural that on social media you hear from self-advocates, again, because they're able to self-advocate, right? And the voice of parents has been shut down quite a bit on social media, because you hear things like, well, if you don't have autism, you shouldn't be able to speak about autism. And I think that's harmful, because 26.7% of autistic people have profound autism, meaning that's more than a quarter of autistic people who are not on social media and who need their parents, caregivers to advocate for themselves. And right now, there is in some states, at least like mine, Texas, it's really difficult to get services for children like Charlie, especially as he's getting older. He's 11 now. He has very challenging behaviors. For instance, a few months ago, he swallowed a screw. It had to be removed from his colon, with surgery. And that's just something that, again, we don't talk about enough on social media. It's almost taboo to speak about these things. But if we don't talk about these very serious, challenging behaviors that often come with autism, we're not going to get services and help, And I think, people are saying that we need acceptance. Sure, we do, but we're not going to get that acceptance without the awareness. And awareness right now is only focused on a very small part of the autistic community, and I think it's focused on people like us, again, because of our ability to self-advocate. But we need to speak about the hard parts of autism too. It's not saying that autistic people are less than to speak about these challenges. It's important so we can find solutions and help them. And I would really like to see more of that in the future, without it being taboo, without parents being harassed or insulted because they decided to speak of autism in a negative way. It's a fact. Some autistic people have very serious struggles who can be life-threatening. I know firsthand with my son, Charlie. So for the future, I really hope we see more parents speak about those challenges, and that we see, as a consequence, more services and support for people with profound autism.
Yeah, I agree. It's so true, just from the perspective of the fact that so many stories of people with high support needs autism are, it's not that parents aren't, like yourself, Eileen, aren't advocating. It's that they're not being seen, because we have so many people in the community who it feels like they grasp towards this quote unquote saying of inspiration porn, where we see a lot of people who are talking about the kid who becomes high school prom king or queen. And don't get me wrong, that's amazing. But what are we doing to talk about the individuals who have the mental capacity of a 1-year-old, who are about age out of school, who don't have services? Because most publicly funded services in not only the United States, but all over the globe, typically end at the age of 21, 22. How do we go about providing and sharing those stories more and more in our community and make those become the mainstream stories, because those stories matter too. It is a spectrum. Gyasi?
Yeah, this is very good stuff, because actually, I see it as a sign of progress that people are willing to talk about the negative side of autism, and I really appreciate that, because in essence, there is a problem with romanticizing it. I think that's actually led to some bad places, and so I'm really glad. And in terms of parents talking about their kids, I mean, I think about when my mom would sometimes write about me. I mean, if she would do it in a compassionate and loving way that made it like it didn't make me look like a monster or a monstrosity. It just made me more comprehensible, and it actually made me feel seen, actually. And so, I mean, it actually made me feel validated, because my experience was important enough to talk about. And I guess in terms of, I also like what Kerry, you just said about success, because I think there is too much of a tendency to look for the sparkling success story. Did the person go to Ivy League school? Did the person write a best-selling book? But for instance, for me, a great autism success story is the first autistic, Donald Triplett, who basically, he died like a couple of years ago in his 80s, but basically he lived his whole life in the same town where he was born and raised. And he wasn't famous or anything until he was made famous, like when John Donvan, Karen Zucker wrote their book In a Different Key, when they found him. But basically, he just lived in his town. He was very happy. He got along with everyone. Everyone loved him. And basically, to me, that's as much of a success story as a Temple Grandin, because basically, I think that's what we all want. We all want to, be able to find a place where you can live and you can be happy and you can get your needs met. And that's kind of what I want. I want everyone on the autism spectrum to sort of find their place and be integrated in society. And I think one way we can make that happen is by looking at the social model of disability. not instead of the medical model, but as a complement to it, because the social model makes a distinction between impairment and disability. The impairment might be, for instance, not being able to speak or not being able to walk. The disability actually comes from the lack of accessibility. For instance, a building that only has stairs and doesn't have a ramp, or for instance, people not willing to give you assistive technology to help you speak, for instance. And so I guess that's what I would like to see, a better understanding of the social model of disability. And in a way, it actually is happening, because both the World Health Organization and the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities both define disability as being an interaction of a physical and mental impairment and attitude and barriers erected by society that could be architectural or attitudinal.
Yeah. Whenever I hear somebody say autism is a superpower, I understand the perspectives. I would not be in my profession without the key strengths that autism have given my life. But we also have to remember that autism is at the end of the day, is a disability. And there are challenges associated with not only autism, but ADHD and so many other diagnoses that we currently see in the community today. I love that so many people in the comments are just resonating with how you both answered the last question. Just for some housekeeping, because several people mentioned, Gyasi, about getting your book. It's called My Mother's Apprentice, and it's available to check out on Amazon. And Eileen's Instagram page is the Autism Cafe. You could also learn a little bit more about her at the autismcafe.com for those who are writing in the comments. And then the final question, I know it's a little broad, but anything else you'd like us to know about your story, Eileen?
Not specifically about my story, but I just want to, mention again that autistic people are so different from each other. And I think in this world we live in, the social media has a big impact on people. And it's really important to take everything you read on social media with a grain of salt, and to remember that, there are so many autistic people who don't have the luxury of being able to self-advocate. And these people, they don't have a voice unless their caregivers or parents speak on their behalf. And, if my mom had spoken about my autism when I was a child on social media, as long as it was done in a compassionate way and in a, not degrading, I would have been so happy and so proud that she was, not ashamed of me, and that she was showing the world about, the struggles that come with autism and the good parts, because there are some good parts. And I don't think it's true that all autistic people would be horrified if their parents shared their life on social media. I mean, I don't know about you, Kerry, but to me, that shows love.
Love and compassion. Gyasi?
Yes, I guess anything I would like to add, I guess, I'll be 51 in May, but in many ways, I'm still a work in progress. I'm still developing. I believe in lifelong learning. And the reason why I bring this up is because I want to sort of talk about the nuances behind the phrase presumed competence. I think it's important to presume competence, but that doesn't mean we're never going to make a mistake or be wrong. What it does mean is that we can learn and that we're worth teaching. Because too often, I think people sometimes may just throw up their hands, the first little cock up, and it's like, oh my God, his disability has reared its ugly head. We can't do anything. Well, no, actually, I can learn. Maybe it'll take me a little longer than you expect. Maybe I won't pick up on it immediately, but eventually, I'm worth teaching.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, no, I love that. Speaking of, you're turning 51. What is your skin routine? My God, I'm 36 and I'm literally, I've been trying not to squint because then the lines in my forehead will be like showing up like insane. What's your secret, sir? Just before we move to the next. No secrets?
No.
Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot. But thank you all so much for answering these past panel questions. And now it is for all of you, we would love to answer any specific questions you have at this time. Feel free to write them in the comments, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Thank you all so much.
So I do have a couple of questions that came in, Dr. Magro. So I'll just start with some of the more autism-specific questions. So we do have a professional here today that shares that in many communities that they work in, they get asked quite often around what causes autism and is it on the rise? Are there any insights or guidance with regards to how to go about answering that question?
Yeah. Well, Eileen, Gyasi, would you like to start? I have some thoughts, but more than happy to have you guys start it off.
Go for it, Kerry.
Okay, so what I was going to say is I receive a little over 100, 150 questions each month from parents, educators, therapists, companies, first responders. And one of the most frequent questions I get asked is, why are we seeing a rise in the number of people being diagnosed with autism? I feel like a lot of it comes back to this simple comment that I hear a lot. Back in my day, we didn't have any of this autism and ADHD stuff. And that's not true. We had it, but it wasn't being diagnosed. It was being labeled as mental retardation. It was being labeled mentally handicapped. And now we're seeing that in the world, especially in the digital age, we have better knowledge of resources, which is leading to more individuals being diagnosed than ever before. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we are seeing this increase. In my new book that just came out, Supporting Your Autism Journey, we kind of do a deep dive into that because it's so important to discuss this so we can get the education out there. So people aren't necessarily saying it's vaccines or it's the lead in our water. There are environmental factors, there are genetic factors that are components as well. But one of the biggest things I've seen overall, just from my research and my years in the field, has been that we're just seeing more people going about receiving that diagnosis and more people understand the signs leading to those diagnoses happening.
Thank you so much for answering that question, Dr. Magro. Sorry, go ahead, Gyasi.
I was going to say that makes sense, because even if you were to go back in the day to when we didn't have ADHD or autism or whatever, we had other things. They were called other things, like Kerry mentioned, right? Even like in the 19th century, it might have been called neurasthenia. So it was always there. Now it's just being talked about and recognized, and acknowledged.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask a question about the levels. I didn't. There's questions coming in here. Somebody asked specifically, what's the difference between level 1, 2, and 3 ASD?
I can take this one. So the levels are described as needing level 1, minimal support, level 2, moderate support, and level 3, I can't say that word, a lot of support for level 3. They're also labeled as mild, moderate, and severe, level 3 being the most severe level of autism. So I think all three of us on this call are classified level 1. And someone like my son, Charlie, who has all the severe challenging behaviors I mentioned earlier and who's nonverbal at age 11 is classified level 3. I don't think the levels are being used in the UK. I could be wrong. I think it's a United States thing.
Yeah, and I think the word you were looking for was substantial
That's
support.
one.
Yeah, there you go. And it's I mean, level 3, it's also important to realize that when we're talking about level 3 autism specifically, a lot of the times it focuses on the realms of nonverbal social communication skills, which cause severe impairments. But also at the same time, I think just one thing I want to note in this is that a lot of the times when we think non-speaking, a lot of people just pivot right away to think unintelligent, when there are so many non-speaking individuals who are so brilliant. I can name 5 off the top of my head, Carly Fleischman being one of the biggest examples of this. So it's important to understand that, like, when we talk about different levels, not necessarily to fit every single person into one little box just based on one characteristic they may have on the autism spectrum.
Amazing, thank you. Another question that came in is, could each of you, or maybe one of you, share a specific therapy or a strategy or a specialized school that had a significant impact on your success?
Gyasi, you want to do this one? Just
Sure. I can't say a specific therapy. I mean, around the time I was diagnosed, a psychiatrist I was seeing said I benefited from growing up without a label. And I disagreed with him at the time because I was still a little upset about all the misunderstanding. But over the years, I've come to see he had a point, in essence. And so, but I mean, I'm still glad people are being diagnosed earlier today, because I don't think it's good for them to think that they're deficient in some way. So I like to hope that people, will have the understanding that someone is autistic, but don't let that hold you back. And I guess that gets to me to what I would say is the best therapy, or a therapy that works. And I would say it's natural supports. So for instance, not, putting me into something because I'm autistic and need this, but because maybe, for instance, I'm not good in sports, so I need this. Or I need extra tutoring, or I need to go outside, or I need something that can help anyone in my situation, regardless of what type of disability they have, because it works. Like, I think my mom getting me into reading, always having me signed up for our local library's summer reading program, for instance. This is an example. Or for instance, me, my mom was a single parent. And of course, she was never going to go camping, so I was in the Boy Scouts, so I'd go camping with those people, and that was giving me a certain degree of a male influence outside the house, so things like that. So natural supports, I guess. I'm a big believer in natural supports.
Okay, thanks for sharing that, Gyasi. I have 2 questions for Eileen, not to bombard you, Eileen, hope you don't mind, but the first one was, what led you to seeking your adult diagnosis of autism?
So I sought an autism diagnosis. I wouldn't say I sought the autism diagnosis, but so my son Charlie was diagnosed when he was 2 years old. And when I told my mom that Charlie had been diagnosed with autism, she lives in France, and she said, Charlie can be autistic. You were the exact same way as a child. And that started putting seeds in my mind. I brushed it off at first, but after I started blogging about autism, I started getting those online tests about online diagnosis, and I took one, and it said I had autism, but it's just an online test, right? I'm not going to use that as a diagnosis tool. And after a while, I started really seeing myself in the traits of level 1 autism. So I went through a therapeutic assessment, and I was diagnosed at the end of it. And I just want to mention that this is like really heavy duty testing. It was dozens of hours of tests, like, speaking to my family, friends, like people who knew me. It wasn't not just like self-reported online tests. It was very thorough. And, at the end of it, I was just ready for answers as to why I was different. So some of the things that I really struggle with, like maintaining friendships, like I said, like anything like going to events, going to the grocery store, noise sensitivity, nonverbal communication, all of that are things that made my life really, really difficult growing up. And I never understood why. I was diagnosed as gifted when I was in France, and as having social anxiety. That was the 2 things. And so having that diagnosis of autism really like tied it together and made sense.
Okay, thank you. The second question we have is, where can we watch Who Speaks for Charlie, for anyone that wants to watch it?
Nowhere yet, because it's still going to film festivals, so it can be public while it's going through the circuit of film festivals, but it will be on YouTube before the end of the year, and I'll share on my social media.
Okay, amazing, thank you. We have a question around Autism Acceptance Month. What would you recommend to schools that are talking about Autism Acceptance Month and are asking whether they should wear blue or red or multicolor, etc., to support neurodiversity? Any thoughts or recommendations around that?
I have so many thoughts on that question. Yeah, Kerry, he knows. I mean, I think it's, whatever you choose, it's okay. Because, some people prefer red, some people prefer blue, some people prefer the puzzle piece, some the infinity loop symbol. Like, choose what speaks for you, what's best for you, for yourself. At first, it was called the color blue and the puzzle piece symbol, but some people don't like that and chose to go red and infinity loop, which is fine. I think the only issue is if you start telling people that all autistic people hate the puzzle piece, all autistic people hate the color blue, so make a personal choice for yourself. Don't impose your choice on others. And, we're all in this together. At the end of the day, we have the same goal for autistic people. So.
Yeah. What I would just add on top of that is we often talk about the whole difference between person first and identity first language. So a person with autism versus an autistic person, and validating the choices of the self-advocates who are able to speak and be able to communicate which language they prefer, and use the language that they prefer. I kind of feel of it. I'm speaking at a school on Friday in New York. I'm based in New Jersey, and they were asking me just the same question earlier this week. Should we have all the students wear blue for your student assembly? And I kind of took a step back, and I was really thinking about that. And I was like, well, why not just ask if there are self-advocates at the school, what they prefer, and kind of validate based on their own choices of what they would like to be seen done, whether it's wearing blue, wearing red. I think that's just a great way of just embracing and including individuals who are on the spectrum as part of the entire school community. That could be definitely a great way to start the conversation too.
That's really probably the best thing to do, what Kerry just said. Because what I was trying to think about the question, because I was trying to think, yes, individuals should do what feels comfortable to them, but what is an institution supposed to do that needs to serve many people? And so I was almost thinking, maybe choose something and explain why it is, or maybe have different options. Maybe sometimes have the puzzle piece, sometimes have the infinity symbol. In other words, have a diversity and then show the diversity. And of course, let individuals do what they're going to do. But like, how do you serve, for instance, the whole student body, for instance, by maybe showing that diversity?
Yeah,
that's a really good recommendation. I know a couple of books were recommended during this conversation today, but we did have a question specifically from a parent of a young child. What book would you recommend to that parent learning about autism for the first time? Or many books, perhaps.
There's a book I really like. Are we talking for children? I think it's a good one for children. Yeah. It's All Cats Are on the Autism Spectrum. And it's a very cute and a very, very nice book to explain autism to kids.
Yeah. I love that book as well. As a shameless plug, just because I have it here. I wrote a children's book called, and we're talking about Light It Up Blue. So I wrote a children's book called I Will Light It Up Blue, which focuses on twins who are on the autism spectrum that learn about an initiative that changes their lives forever. We were just reading the book at a K-5 school earlier this week. And for children, I would definitely recommend that. For parents, thinking in pictures is always a great way to start the conversation. It's written by the esteemed autism self-advocate, Dr. Temple Grandin, who rose to worldwide acclaim when the movie about her life starring Claire Danes came out in 2011, I believe. So I definitely recommend that. And my latest book, Supporting Your Autism Journey, which just came out yesterday on Amazon, I share a lot of tips for parents because, ironically enough, my dissertation was in parents' perceptions of resources after that initial diagnosis, because a lot of parents who are just new to this community for the first time, sometimes the doctors don't have that information, and it feels like deer in headlights, and they don't feel like they're getting support. So I tried to write a a little bit in my book about how to support those new parents as well. So.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Dr. Magro, you talked earlier in this conversation today about some of your passions and your interests when you were younger. And we do have a question around how to find that thing, that passionate interest for, I'm not sure if it's a parent or an educator. They give the example that most of the kids that they work with or support or care for like numbers and letters, but they want to continue expanding different areas of interest and learning. Do you have any recommendations around that?
Yeah, there's a great online assessment for students in K through 12 called the Classroom Assessments, Techniques, and Strategies, also known as, for shorter term, CATS. If you Google that, it really focuses on strength-based learning and trying to find what students' significant interests are, such as their hobbies and their special interests, to really help nurture that. I sound like a broken record because Dr. Temple Grandin is my mentor and one of my heroes in the community, but she says that interests and talents can turn into careers. And I feel like a lot of the times, and it was great that so many of you in the comments were writing about there's such an emphasis on deficit modeling. I feel like that's unfortunate, where we focus 99.9% of the time on what our kids can't do. What are we doing to nurture strengths? And one way we can do that is feel things like CATS, receiving online feedback from our students on how best they learn, whether that's being an auditory learner, kinetic learner, or a visual learner. So it's not only about helping them nurture their interest, but also finding best how they learn to really help them reach developmental milestones and really thrive.
Yeah, I guess I would just add to that to not see their special interest as something to eliminate, but actually to use. In fact, that's another book recommendation, Life Animated by Ron Suskind. He's a journalist, and he actually talks about how he was able to connect with his son through his son's love of Disney films. And so basically, because his son loved Disney films, that's how he and the father would talk. And so I would say, and of course, Temple Grandin did that with her love of her interest in animals. She had a science teacher who said, well, let's do a science experiment. And that's part of how she came with her squeeze shoe. And another book I'd recommend is Uniquely Human by Barry Prezant, which also demystifies autism by taking some of the more bizarre things like delayed echolalia and humanizes them and makes them pretty much normal. That in essence, delayed echolalia are not meaningless phrases. They communicate things that are very important. That actually, in fact, they're very much like idiomatic expressions. It's like when we say "hit the ball out of the park." That expresses an emotion, even though there's not a ball anywhere near us. But so that's the type of delayed echolalia. So. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Gyasi. Dr. Magro, could you repeat the name of the assessment, the online assessment that you had mentioned there a second ago?
Yeah, so it looks like Valerie in the comments posted the link. It's from the Vanderbilt University. So it's just the classroom assessment techniques and strategies. It's really just focused on helping find those key interests of students, regardless if they have autism or not. So highly recommend checking that out.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. We do have 1 minute left, so if it's okay, we'll wrap up question and answer time, unless there's anything else you guys wanted to add to anything with regards to the questions.
Well, just in the spirit of time, could we go back to my slide deck really, really quickly? I just wanted to share this. I know it looks a little crazy on here, so I apologize for that, but we consider testimonials the greatest compliment. If you have something nice you want to say to any of our incredible esteemed panelists today, you can scan that QR code with your camera phone.